broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list. Hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu. And I'm that spitter, baby. They don't want you to see, but everybody south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and plan to getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That Dre season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my old flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on. To the hearse, party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete. I'm a verbal athlete, deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building. My whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
I just want to live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
All right, good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury, and all this week, my partner in crime, Trey Holiday, is on a much-deserved vacation. But I do have a good friend and a fellow Garfield Bulldog, Naomi Ishisaka from the Seattle Times. How are you?
I'm great. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay to be in the studio, huh?
It's a little weird to be out of my house. So I'm getting used to it. I had to remember how to park. That was something I haven't had to do in a long time. So
all right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Once again, welcoming everybody here to the Morning Update Show, and a reminder that right now is the perfect opportunity to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share the stream with people who you feel would appreciate culturally relevant news and information emanating from right here in the Emerald City. Want to give a big shout out to our partners at the South Seattle Emerald and KBCS 91.3. They're over there at Bellevue College. Also want to remind everybody that you can catch the Morning Update Show everywhere that you listen to your favorite podcasts. So SoundCloud, there it is. Thank you all. Yeah, SoundCloud there on the screen, and we'll also share that link with you. But also iTunes and Google and Spotify, anywhere that you listen to podcasts, you can now listen to the Morning Update Show, and all of our other shows are there as well. So you want to check that out. All right, before we jump into it today, we got an overlay we'll put up here with the queens of Converge. We'll put this link in the comments as well. You can find this up there at on the Converge website in the blog. The Queens of Converge, Black women media professionals, find authenticity and community at Converge Media. And let me jump right in over here real quick. I think this is Jake Gravbrot, our photographer, our exceptional photographer, took all these photos here. We'll play this. So that's Trey Holiday and Basa Gordon and Julia Jesse, Treyana. And, Basa hosts the Rewind with Basa here. She's got a show actually this Saturday at 2 p.m. Julia Jesse, the half of Clapback Culture. Clapback Culture is this Thursday at 7 p.m. And that's her co-host, Mike Davis, who's back there as well. Trey Holiday. And by the way, I was intentional in putting some merchandising shots in here. A good way that you can support Converge Media is go to whereweconverge.com/shop. Naomi, throwing this out there, how, we pride ourselves as a workspace and an environment in the Converge swag where people can kind of show up as they are. How important is that?
I think it's really important. I think, in the past, a lot of media organizations were not as welcoming as they should have been to people of all different backgrounds. And I think being able to show up as you are is critical in the media.
Yeah, and believe me, all three of them definitely show up as they are.
I love those photos. Those are gorgeous.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, so we've only got one or two headlines here because I want to spend all the time in a good conversation. But this news came out yesterday from the city of Seattle and the Seattle Parks Department. We'll go and put this up here. City says won't permit Juneteenth celebration in Cal Anderson on anniversary of CHOP formation. This was something a lot of different people in different communities for different reasons were following this story. I mean, of course, there was this was originally billed as a CHOP art celebration or block party, and kind of tied in with Juneteenth. There were former CHOP artists and people who were in the protests who weren't necessarily for it, and then also people in the neighborhood. There were some people who were for it, but 1 year later, Naomi, I think that the city as a whole, whether it's this individuals or the actual city, people are struggling to come to terms of like how do we recognize this historic event that happened in Seattle 1 year ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did a huge series of stories about this around the end of May with the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and I think what happened at the Chaz CHOP Capitol Hill, I think has really captured the imagination of people across the country for good and bad, and I think being able to maybe share what was documented in a way, or talk about the art that was created or things like that, I think is really important to remembering that period and taking stock of where we are and where we were and what we need to do to move forward.
Right. And well, there we go. There we're back again. One thing that came out of our reporting here, Ike Everard talked to some people who were involved in the protests and protest leaders and things like that. Talked to TK and talked to Ish from Black Action Coalition, and also talked to Mark Anthony and people in the community. And a lot of them were like, it just seems to be some healing that needs to occur, especially at least for the people who were directly impacted, whether it was protesters, residents who lived up there on the Hill, the business owners. Because you get a bunch of people together up there in Capitol Hill, I'll be honest with you, everybody just starts crying. They start hugging and crying and everything else. It's just, I think it's still something that's very raw. I think it's important that we definitely acknowledge what's occurred. But a lot of people still have a raw feeling about the protests.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, it was, more than anyone, that was an intense and traumatic time for a lot of people, and I think it's a year later, but it does feel like it was just last week. More than anyone.
It definitely feels like it was last week. What else do we have up here? Oh, what's up with Ike? So, well, we'll see what's going on. We'll definitely put it up on screen. So Ike Everhart is actually right across the street at Occidental Park, and it looks like they're getting ready to officially open Occidental Park. You can go see we'll peek in and see what's going on over there. Mayor Durkin is getting ready to hold a press conference. It's at 11 o'clock, and, as usual, these things never start on time, whether it's City Hall or over there at the park. So we'll duck back in. Ike, if you can hear us, can you pan around the park real quick? He's good. So like I said, this is just right across the street over at Occidental Park. They've been putting a lot of work in over there and kind of renovating the park and putting in new installations and some of everything else. The mayor starts speaking, we might pop back in. But I've got a more important guest here today than Mayor Durkin at the moment. All right, Ike, we'll catch back with you. Thank you. Man, it's good. We got a little bit of technology. I tell you, we had a little engine that could over here, but we got a little bit of technology. We can bring in a live shot from somewhere and see what's going on. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, first want to know more about your journey and what's going on at the Seattle Times, and then we'll talk about some headlines, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. You are watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap-ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, so I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Hey, it's Jake from Converge Media and Get the F Outside. I hope that all of you are taking advantage of the ability to be outdoors and enjoy nature as our summer months heat up. One other thing that you can take advantage of here in the King County area are free COVID-19 vaccinations. There's all kinds of options for pop-up clinics, and the vaccine is able to be administered to anyone 12 years and older. And did I mention that it's free? You don't need insurance, and they don't care what your citizenship status is. And that kind of sounds like the way things should be anyhow, but we'll save that for another conversation. Information and resources are available at kingcounty.gov/COVID, or you can call the COVID-19 call center at 206-477-3977. Washington, we are almost out of this, but we got to stay locked in for the home stretch. Let's get vaxxed out so we can max out our time with friends, family, and in the great outdoors.
All right. Well, we've got a double screen up there. Welcome back to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury, and I'm joined today in studio by Naomi Ishisaka of the Seattle Times.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, so I know we want to go over a few different headlines here, but first, we brought you in a few times, and we've cited your work a few times, but we've never had an opportunity to be like, this is Naomi, this is what she does, and everything else. So why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, as you know, my journalism career started the same time yours did at the Garfield High School Messenger in 1991 or something, not to date ourselves,
Yeah,
but
you just put us in the time
I'm sorry,
machine.
but it's true. And that's where I think we both kind of got that journalism bug and got the spirit inside of us. I was really fortunate at the time to be part of a journalism training program for students of color that the Seattle Times put on at the time. And that really kind of gave me the foundation and confidence to feel like this is something I could do as a career. And from then I went on to a bunch of different newspapers, and then was the editor of a magazine called Colors Northwest for 8 years, which was a fantastic experience, and was able to kind of lay the groundwork for my work at the Seattle Times, which is both as a social justice columnist, but also as an editor that handles diversity and inclusion and staff development. So it's kind of a really good alignment of the things that I'm most passionate about, which are, race and social justice and journalism, all kind of packaged together in one. So it's kind of a dream come true in that way.
Yeah, no, I remember Colors magazine. Colors was dope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're very proud of it. And a lot of the things that you talk about Converge, like, totally resonates. Like, we were the little engine that could too. Our office was probably about this size, and the things you talk about lack of resources for Black-owned media, totally true for us too. I mean, we were able to hang on for about 8 years, but it was really hard. And then when the recession hit, it was like this tale as old as time. Like the little guy, the media buying for people of color is the one that marketers think doesn't really need the money, or
if it ever existed.
If it ever existed. Right.
Well, let me tell you this though, right? And it's probably something that you might see if this was your experience. Is that a lot of times, at least Black media, I say, is that you get the gimme ads, and the gimme ads are like, well, it's Martin Luther King's birthday. We need to place an ad somewhere at a Black publication, or
right.
It's Black History Month. Let's do whatever. But you never get the ads that really come from the marketing department. Like, hey, there's a new product that we're launching, or a new service, or a new whatever.
Right.
That advertising would hardly ever come to Black media. I'm assuming different ethnic medias as well. But it'd always be like, well, it's something to celebrate Black people. We want to jump on board and put a Martin Luther King ad in there, and you wouldn't hear back from somebody for a whole nother 12 months.
Right. Which is why, people always ask me, well, why didn't you do this thing for Asian History Month, or why didn't you do this thing for, this History Month? And my thing is, like, we should be focusing on these things all year round.
Right.
There shouldn't be 1 month or 28 days to talk about issues that are important to Black folks. There shouldn't be 1 month where we suddenly realize, like we did in May, that Asians exist, and let's do every single panel in the history of, the world in this 1 month period. I think we should be talking about these things all year long, and media, whether that's Converge, whether that's the Times, whether that's Emerald, like, all the media should be supported by the community. And I think it's one of those things where you don't really know what you've got until it's gone.
Right.
And people come up to me all the time, even now, saying how much they miss Colors Northwest, and I think that it speaks to the fact that at the time, people might have thought, oh, this is just going to be around forever. But as we know, like, these institutions are hanging on by a thread a lot of times, and they need our support.
Man, I'm gonna have to pull this clip, because it was a few months ago, and I was actually talking about how there's been great publications in our community that died on the vine, but like, we're standing on their shoulders. Colors being one, C-Spot magazine being another.
Yeah.
That is like, I mean, we're here today because we're able to look back and be like, okay, these guys did it. They've done it. Let's see how we can remix it in a different kind of way. But it's important. So I just want to tell you that your accomplishments at Colors magazine is important. And it's something that we stand upon over here. And this isn't the first time that Colors have been mentioned here on the Morning Update show. It's been mentioned quite a few times since we've been on air.
And the sad part is that you can't really even find it online, because it was kind of pre-internet.
Right.
So I wish I could do something about that, but unfortunately, once things, and that's the other thing about media, is like, once a publication goes out of business, it's really hard to find that publication. If it was, a magazine or something that was in print, anywhere on the internet, it just goes away.
Right. Now, you said that your role over there at the Times is diversity, inclusion, and you're also an editor. Maybe you can explain, because people use the word editor all the time. This is editor, this and that. Mm-hmm. What's the technical? We like to educate people on our show, by the way. So what technically it goes into being an editor?
Well, it kind of depends on your role. So my role is pretty unique. I don't have necessarily a team of reporters that report to me, but what I do is provide support for all the staff around, diverse sourcing, feedback on stories. If we have something called Sensitive News Channel where people post stories that they want to, another eye on. I spend a lot of time reading stories that are posted in there to make sure that if there's anything that I can add from my perspective around, sensitivity or care or something like that, it's voiced before we go to press. As you know, you were just the subject of a fantastic story in Pacific Northwest Magazine. On the cover, it looked great. And that kind of story goes through months and months of edits and care. And as you know, you spent hours with the reporter. And
I've never talked, and I told my mama this before I would the knuckle. I said, Mama, if anything ever happens to me, talk to Brendan Kiley, because there's been nobody in years that I've spent over 20 plus hours talking with him. I've never talked to anybody about my life as much as I talked to Brendan. And
it shows. I mean, it showed in the story. It's just that depth and complexity and the amount of care that went into that piece was just really evident. And that was the work of, of a lot of different people. And so I think, in our newsroom, we have editors that run teams, whether that's, the Metro team or the business team or something like that. And then you have assistant managing editors like myself that are in charge of a particular area of the newsroom. So it might be, visuals or, in my case, diversity and inclusion. And so people have their kind of their area of expertise, and that's kind of mine. And it's a really good fit for me.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense now. Now, I'm glad that I asked you this question because, when you look at the history of the Seattle Times, long history, very, very big publication. The Times, we know the Seattle Times, the Times has all kinds of other holdings and stuff in their network. We can clearly see throughout the history of the time where there wasn't people like you there, and we can see in some of the articles back in the day and some of the adverts and everything else where, the organization at a certain period in time, it wasn't worried about diversity, inclusion, or anything else. And I guess as anything, we've seen growth, and really also, if they want to continue, if any media organization wants to continue to grow, and especially as diverse as our market is coming, a role like yours is important. Not in the sense of even if someone's not wanting to be intentionally insensitive, but, some things you got to go through it to get to it. So having somebody like you there being like, well, I've read this, but to be honest with you, do you have those kind of conversations with people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I'm most proud of about my role is that, the work that you're talking about and the work that you're speaking on has been going on for years. And I think one of the things I'm really proud of is that the entire leadership team, not just me, has been on board with, seeing that we represent our communities as broadly and accurately as we can for a really long time, a number of years. And we have a whole team of staff as well that are part of a diversity task force that works on these issues. And so I'm really proud that, everyone nobody was like, okay, well, we'll put Naomi in this role and then suddenly magically everything's gonna be solved, right? We know we have a lot of work to do, and we've always had a lot of work to do. And I think what's important about this moment is that we're recognizing that, it's everyone's job to work on it. And then it's also something that it takes a daily, just daily focus and attention. Like you said, it's not something that you can just sort of say, oh, that's just going to work out on its own. No, you have to be really diligent and thoughtful and put the time in to really take a look at the stories and ask questions and ask tough questions, and people being open to hearing the answer and not feeling defensive about it. And I'm really proud that we have a staff that's really open in that way, for sure.
No, that's good stuff. And the Times was one of these publications that seems like it's figured out some kind of formula. When everything was on print, then of course print was king, and then it went digital, and a lot of publications just disappeared. And so, how has the Times been able to find this mix? I know that digital platform is something that's real special over there. And then, of course, there's still the print, even though the numbers are lower, and then you're growing your digital side.
Yeah, I think, one of the benefits of being a family-owned newspaper, local family-owned newspaper, is that we're able to really cover the things that are important to our local community, and that's not always true in other in other metro newspapers across the country, unfortunately. And so that's another thing that we might take for granted, but being able to really focus on what our readers and subscribers care about in a comprehensive way, I think, is one of the things that makes it more possible for us to weather some of those storms, right? And, you know, as we know, like, these huge media conglomerations are buying up newspapers across the country, and in many cases, they're gutting their employees, their staffs, they're gutting the coverage, they're leaving what's called ghost papers in their wake, where they're, you know, a paper in name, but they don't actually have any local content. Or, you know, they're a paper that's based in Chicago, but their coverage is in Florida, and they don't actually know anything that's going on in Florida. I think having, you know, local ownership, as you know from your work as well, like having local ownership, people that know the community, have roots in the community, makes a really big difference in the kind of coverage that you see.
How difficult is it like at the times in a big newsroom operation where people have a lot of demands on, you know, things they want covered? Because sometimes over here, I mean, we're as small as we are, it's like, man, Converge, this is going on, that's going on, this is, you know, I mean, with our resources that we have, we try to do what we can, whether it's just a mission, maybe that's what we could do. Sometimes, you know, we can actually get out there. Sometimes we can share social posts. But what's it like there in that kind of setting, trying to figure out like the level of, I don't want to say importance, but, you know, determining which story. Of course, big news stories are big news stories. This happened at City Hall, this building burnt down, this happened there. But that layer below, when you talk about things that impact on a local level, you know, how difficult or easy is that for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the challenge for every news organization, is to make those judgments around, you know, here are the things that we absolutely have to give to our readers because they need to know for their daily lives. I mean, COVID is a really good example of that. You know, we put a lot of our coverage outside of the paywall because it was information that the public needed to know for their own health and safety, and that was paramount, right? But then there's things that come up in, you know, the features department or other departments where it's much more of a judgment call. You know, it's not the obvious sort of, you know, fire across the street sort of story. It's the story that, you know, my colleague Crystal Paul, who's fantastic and should be on, you know, you should have her on the show too. She's great. She wrote about the mental health impacts of COVID on folks who work in the theater industry. Right? These are not stories that people necessarily would find would necessarily rise to that like fire coverage sort of thing, but they're stories about our community, about the people in our community and the things that they're struggling with that kind of go unseen and unheard. And I think the way that we are able to really comprehensively tell the story of our community is to tell some of those untold stories, the ones that are less obvious, the ones that you kind of have to go under the radar and really dig around and really ask questions and talk to people and get to know people.
Right. One last question on this, and we'll take another break, and then we'll hop into the headlines. COVID. Let's talk pre-COVID. When people talk about a newspaper like newsroom and everything else, back when everybody was still like in the same space, or even before the construction over there off of Bourne. Is it really like that? You know what I'm saying? Like where it's all these desks are there, this guy is just the lead and blah, 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 and people running around and, you know, it's, man, we've got 30 minutes to get it to press. What are you going to do? Or is it more of a chill environment? I mean, now it's different, close, you know, so I'm speaking like pre-COVID and all of that.
I think it's both. It's on days like chill environment, but I think there are also days where news happens that everyone just knows that it's like, it's, you know, breaking, all hands on deck, everyone jumps. Like I wasn't there at the time, but I know the Oso landslide was one of those cases, and we did some extraordinary coverage on that. The weirdest thing about the COVID, biggest story of our life, right? The biggest story of our lifetime, but we didn't have that, you know. We did the opposite. We had the big story of our life that everyone was all hands on deck on, but we were all in our homes, you know. And so we had to make a really rapid adjustment, just like everyone else did. And so, you know, I kind of wonder sometimes, like, what would our COVID coverage have been like if we had had that sort of, intense in the newsroom, running around sort of, situation. Although there really wasn't the same kind of like one day that, you can say, well, that was the day, that was the big day that, everything happened. COVID kind of was a slow trickle and then, developed into, this epic story that we'll never, forget in our whole lives. So yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. There's definitely that energy, that hum when a big story happens, and there's also just days where it's just people quietly working at their, at the computers.
Yeah, our newsroom here, it's a bit small. It's not. It gets intense.
It's pretty impressive, I have to say. I'm like trying not to be intimidated by all these cameras, but.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna be talking. Some of these headlines here that you have written your column. You are watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't missing my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Hey, it's Jake from Converge Media and Get the F Outside. I hope that all of you are taking advantage of the ability to be outdoors and enjoy nature as our summer months heat up. One other thing that you can take advantage of here in the King County area are free COVID-19 vaccinations. There's all kinds of options for pop-up clinics, and the vaccine is able to be administered to anyone 12 years and older. And did I mention that it's free? You don't need insurance, and they don't care what your citizenship status is. And that kind of sounds like the way things should be anyhow, but we'll save that for another conversation. Information and resources are available at kingcounty.gov/COVID, or you can call the COVID-19 call center at 206-477-3977. Washington, we are almost out of this, but we got to stay locked in for the home stretch. Let's get vaxxed out so we can max out our time with friends, family, and in the great outdoors.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. Joined by Naomi Ishisaka, and I got it. This is this epic photo right here over my shoulder. This is probably the first photo that people saw of me in the Seattle protest holding this red iPhone, which is actually in Mohi now. The red iPhone. You took that picture.
I did. I was a little bit like, we weren't supposed to be out and about because of COVID. And so I was there taking pictures, but I was also kind of like trying to stay out of the way because, they were really worried that our staff was going to get COVID out in the field. So I was like, but yeah, I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is iconic. Omari doing his thing. In the heat of it.
And you see right behind you there, that was an artist over at the Crosscut.
That's so cool.
Right. Yeah, that's, man. So photography is something else then, right?
Yeah. That's kind of what I was doing full time before I started at the Times.
Okay. Good stuff. All right. So first we got here, and we'll put up this clip on the support around the protests. Let's see. Voila. Oh, wow. It says here, we'll hold it there, a very, they got me all the way out. And now she got me on the screen. We got to refresh these. It didn't go exactly like I wanted to there, but why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, so Are we talking about the
support around the protests?
Yeah. So I wrote not this week, but the previous week around the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, that the support, particularly among white Americans, had really plummeted since the high after George Floyd's murder, and I talked about that because I think it's important that people recognize that these movements for change, people kind of want instant gratification. They want to see like, okay, and I wrote about this on a different issue, that it's kind of like a vending machine. Like people want to say, let's put in our, quarter and then out will come justice. And as we know, we didn't get here in a year, we got here after hundreds of years. And so we're not going to get out of it in a year. And so I think, people's ability to kind of keep a focus on the things they want to see change, and not say, well, crime is up, or this thing didn't go exactly the way we wanted it to, or what about this participatory budgeting process? And, those are all really good questions, and we should continue to be vigilant and continue to ask those questions. But I think it's also important that we don't look for the instant gratification that we're so used to, and that particularly for white folks that were supportive of racial justice changes after George Floyd's killing, recognizing this is a long haul. This is not something that, you just put up your Black Lives Matter sign in your yard and then say, okay, I did my part, and now I'm just going to go back to the way things were before.
Yeah, I got a few questions for you. Is the first one being, how do you feel, or do you feel that the way that this movement around the value of Black lives, being the different narratives in media, might have as well changed people's momentum or perception around the protests?
Oh yeah, I see this every single time I write about this topic. As you know, the Fox, I think it was Fox News, had that famous image of what they called Crazy Town, and they also had a picture of a burning building and someone running, and we did a big story about the fact that wasn't actually a picture of Seattle at all, and I think that speaks to the fact that narrative has really taken hold across the country. I get emails from people all the time that are saying, Seattle's just on fire, there's chaos and all this violence on the streets all day, every day. And you look at your house and you're kind of like, what are they talking about? That's not what it looks like here. But that narrative has so taken hold around Portland and Seattle being on fire, and Portland and Seattle like basically being, this den of anarchy and destruction that doesn't really match reality, but I think it's really taken hold.
Yeah, I think that you're right with that, for sure. Man, the reporting that was coming out of Seattle was so crazy. I remember the Associated Press, they called me, and I sat down with them for almost an hour because they were just doing myth busting. They were like, we're getting reports that protesters are going door to door to people's houses asking for rations. Mm-hmm. If there's no rations, they're marking the home. I'm like, bro, there's like a QFC like right across the street from the Chop. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be bootsy, there's even a Trader Joe's. I mean, but it was crazy because they were calling me from New York, and they were like, is this true? Is that true? I was like, no, this isn't true. But, and it definitely impacted even Seattle. What was going on here impacted nationally because it was national news. But I think that also here locally, where we start to see a decline in support is I don't think that people in Seattle realized that these protests and what was going on here, they lumped everything into one. Meaning that like you had tens of thousands of Black people who were out there in the South End, they get in the CD. There was no police around. Police didn't even need to be there.
Yeah.
There was but they were in the streets. Their voice was being heard peacefully, week in, week out, teachings, all these kind of things. There was no like coverage of it, you know what I'm saying? At least to the level of where Capitol Hill was. And then people don't realize is that, yes, there was a lot of people who were out there to uplift the value of Black lives. But there's also an element that's always been here, the May Day element and some of everything else. And then I think a lot of the local media was able to spin these actions of 30 or 40 people who, you know, this is what they've been doing here in our city, and then say BLM protesters or activists try to burn down this building. BLM did this and that, and where actually the people, and actual Black people especially, who were in the streets uplifting Black lives, was 100% peaceful the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I'm sure you were there too, but the protest that went from Othello Park down to Rainier Beach, right by where I live, and you know, I've never seen that many people on the street in the South End at one time before in my entire life, and it was absolutely beautiful to see. Like, it was joyous. There was music. There was, you know, there were immigrant families that were standing on the corner, like beating pots and pans in support, and it was run by the young folks from Community Passageways. I mean, but you didn't see the helicopters overhead, you know, doing video of this massive march that you saw every single day on anything that was, you know, quote unquote, like destructive. And so it's really interesting, to your point, that was so poorly covered by, you know, the news media, when the things that were 30 or 40 people, you know, breaking a window at Starbucks was like huge news.
Yeah, you know, during that time it was interesting because Capitol Hill, there was the red iPhone, but the stuff that was in our community, you go back through the streams, we had a whole setups over there, 3 cameras, this and that, because it was important, because there were so many speakers that was there. Yeah. All of these events were well thought out and well put together. And then, like, you would talk to people, you know, in the city, average citizens, and they'll be like, yeah, well, I was supportive of the whole BLM thing until it turned violent. I was supportive of the whole BLM thing until they started doing this or that. And, you know, we used to always tell people, be like, we would request that the average citizen dig a little deeper, go deeper than just this headline you're seeing, and you'll see that there's a lot of different layers involved of what was going on in the protests.
And read, you know, I commend the work that you did to document all of that, and it's so important. And I think that, you know, the Seattle Times did a really good job of covering it, as did Crosscut and other word-based media. But I think what happens is that people want the sensationalized, you know, video footage of people causing destruction, or, you know, that kind of thing, and that's what kind of leads the newscast, and that's what people see, and that's what's been carried across the country about what Seattle is. Yeah,
you know, it's interesting you say that, because during the same time all these things were going on and we were still up there on Capitol Hill, like, I remember we did a live special when I think it was the committee vote whether to defund or not. This was before it went to the actual council, and we go live on it, and like in all the comments, everybody's disappointed because they're like, "What? There, you know what I'm saying? There's no action," and you know that you see the numbers plummet. But that committee vote, and then onward to the vote and everything else, this was the direct action that people in the streets were asking for city council to do something. And so then you put on city council, or you put public comment into the live stream, and all the numbers just plummet. Right. And, you know, I mean, we used to call it trauma porn. You know, people would just be tuning in to just see something explode. And when we actually would be streaming, this is our democracy in process here. Right. This is a city council debate. This is the mayor doing this. This is our legislature. You would find that it was in a decline, and it's almost like the people who are consuming information. I think you're right. A lot are, but clearly a lot still are reading and things like that. But there's a good portion of people who are just consuming the top level and just running with it.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that, you know, the media, Seattle Times, Converge, like the media that is working really on behalf of the public interest, knows that it's those policy-making moments that are not as sexy, but are pivotal to our democracy and pivotal to our ability to create the social fabric that we're looking for, and this, you know, civic society that we're looking for, and audiences are like, oh, that's boring. You know, what's more exciting is that from the barricades, the the action, the drama, and I think as media consumers, and I've been guilty of this as well. But as media consumers, we have to really support the things that are on the less sexy side of the spectrum. Read them, watch them, pay attention to them, absorb them. Add them to our how we think about the world around us, and it's hard to do because we're in a very short attention span society where we want those little clips, we want things to be TikTok length, we want them to be exciting, and policy stuff is not always exciting. Like making laws are not always exciting.
You know what I did find though, which is really interesting, and I didn't care, but I didn't know like how it was gonna play out, because I was getting a lot of information, because Kevin Schofield was watching City Hall while we were in, so there was no way for us to even follow what was going on in City Hall. And so I would just talk to Kevin like on Twitter early on, like this during CHOP, and he'd be like, yeah, this happened, that happened, or whatever. And then one day I was like, man, can you just come on my show and talk about this and that? And like, I've never met as many people from our community who just love to tune in now. I mean, they watch the other show with Kevin and Brian Callanan, Seattle News, Views and Brews. Like people from our community, like elders, they love that show because they're learning so much about the city and this and that and policy and everything else. So I will say that one thing that's happening is that, people in our community, a lot of them who never followed City Hall, who never followed anything, like, man, they're really in the mix.
I love that. I love to hear that. And I think you're making a good point. It's like you don't have to necessarily have like a big media institution to have important conversations like, Seattle City Council Insights is doing, or, other entities or people that are trusted and are doing their research and vetting their sources and really thinking about the topics they cover to be credible sources of information.
All right, good stuff. So we got another one here. I think this was just the other day, and this is about voting rights. So I got my monitor on now, so we should be good. You go put that up. Oh, no, we got one more. Which one is it? Well, we could talk about this one here. That was back in May of last year.
July, I think, yeah.
July of last year. He said the time was running out to protect voting rights. It's like you forecasted or something, right?
Not only that, but I mean, what I was writing about last year was that, there were all these efforts to try to kind of pandemic proof the election, because we knew we were going to be looking at an unprecedented election where people are going to be even more afraid to be in person, in crowds. And we had a situation where, we were looking at one of the most pivotal elections of our history, but we also, had elders and vulnerable folks that were potentially going to be standing in, 5, 6, 7 hour lines to do what they have a right to do and exercise their right to vote. And I think that whole period was pretty chilling. And I think we saw that what ended up happening was that people just, they saw what was coming down in terms of trying to prevent them from voting, and they were like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to just flood, we're just going to flood the zone, if that's the proper sports analogy. I'm sorry, I shouldn't try to make sports analogies because I don't know what I'm talking about. Is that the right one?
No, it works.
Okay. But try to, just get turnout so high that there was no way that people could disenfranchise them. There was no way that, they could use these voter suppression rules to prevent them from exercising their rights.
And they turned out, they actually turned some states from red to blue. And that kind of almost leads us here to our next one now, because we see that all across America, it's a lot of, almost every state in the union, there's
48 states, yeah.
Yeah, there's people, it's new Jim Crow there. There you go. Why you should care that other states are restricting voting rights at record pace. This was just, 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is my story, my column this week. And really what we've seen is that, since the election, legislatures across the country are, there were 369 or something voter suppression laws introduced in legislatures nationwide, and they saw this turnout. legislators saw this turnout and they said, okay, well, we can't have that again. So let's make sure that we do whatever we can, whether that's, limiting the number of hours that you can vote, eliminating early voting, restricting mail-in balloting, all these different things, pretty much, all the way to you can't give someone water who's been standing in line in Georgia to vote, that's not allowed anymore either. And so there's all these different rules that have been put in place to kind of counteract what we saw in November, which is just people coming out and, coming out to vote in record numbers. And, I think in Washington, which was, recently surveyed to be the second easiest place to vote in the country, second only to Oregon, with all mail-in voting, it might be easy to kind of say, well, why do we care about that here? Why does it matter to us? And what I was arguing in this column is that it should matter to all of us. We are a country, and if voters are being disenfranchised in Georgia, that should matter to us as much as voters are being disenfranchised in Seattle.
Yeah, well, and it should definitely matter to us because the vote is our share. We're all shareholders in this country.
Right.
It's your civic responsibility. Somehow people have let people off the hook. Like, you do have some roles and responsibility in society, to keep our society moving and vibrant, and voting is one of them, and the protection of the vote, but also you see the end results as well. And I could go on and on. I'm telling people, like, man, this is why it's important to vote. But when in talking to my elders and things like that, they just point out that this is one big cycle here. That it was legally, they used legalities in constitutions or state constitutions and county laws to keep black people and other people from voting.
Yeah.
And then
there were poll tests, there were poll taxes.
Well, after then, people were given the right to vote. So then it went from like this legal ink on paper thing. And it's like, yeah, you can vote. Then it came out with intimidation, like you said,
terrorism.
Poll tax and literacy tests and, grandfather tests and everything else. And now they're going back to legislation. You get what I'm saying? And so when you talk to people with this wide view, let's be clear, black people's vote has always been suppressed in this country. You know what I'm saying? Amongst other groups as well. People forget that, technically women, at least white women, were granted the right to vote. It was about 100 years ago.
And then women of color, not for decades after. Yeah.
And so, and I don't think people understand that the way that the country was really set up and the way that it goes, and that's why we're a republic, is that when these guys were putting all this stuff together, it couldn't really be one person, one vote for president, because it was all a bunch of poor people over there outside of this, this upper class, what people refer to as the founding fathers. If it was just like, everybody's vote counted, whatever, especially for president, then they just get voted out in one term. So
you'd have a situation where you'd have a huge amount of voters who are black in areas that they didn't want black voters.
And so this has all been systemic. You know what I'm saying? We got to be clear. Back in the day, if you was poor and white, you couldn't vote. In the early days of America, it's like, you don't own no land, you don't get no vote. So it's like suppression has been real here from day one, no matter what in our history. And I don't think people should be surprised that it's still here, but people are surprised. They're like, oh my God, they're starting to block the vote. And you talk to a lot of old people in black communities, like, when did they ever stop?
Yeah, and I think listening to the elders and getting those stories is so important, and it'd be a great show to have, just talking to folks about what their own experiences were, because I think that's history. We don't talk about it enough, and we don't recognize the parallels to what we're seeing today.
So we've got a few minutes left here. Maybe you can tell us what's next up on your radar, without giving away too much. But what are some of the things that are going on in our city or in our society that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, I think one of the big ones is, we are crossing our fingers, looking at potentially a COVID recovery, and what is that going to look like here? Is that going to be something where we see sort of disaster capitalism, where you see folks that have already been kind of able to game the system, gaming it even more, or are we going to see a system where the most vulnerable business owners and community organizations and individuals get the support they need to, even survive? And I think that we're looking at kind of a post-COVID future now, and really need to be thoughtful and intentional about what that looks like and who it's actually going to serve and who it's not.
Yeah, I got a feeling that in the midst of everything, maybe to keep people encouraged, stuff like that it was like, going to build back different. It's going to be a new normal and everything. Yeah, stuff's just kind of looking pretty normal. Like, as things, come back and they return. And some things we definitely cherish the normalcy in our city. But, for months, people talked about this window of like, when we bring Seattle back, it's a great opportunity for Seattle to be a more fair and equitable city, not only in policy, but just all throughout, in the business sector, downtown, there's our offices downtown here. What's a new downtown going to look like? It's going to look like the same downtown? Is the same? Are new people going to have access? That's the thing I'm kind of keeping my eye on, because it was a lot of talk about, man, we're going to build back better in the new Seattle.
And I think one of the things that, news organizations like ours can do really well is to see where does the rhetoric actually match the reality. Like everyone says that we're going to build back better, we're going to lift up the folks that are most marginalized, we're going to do all the right things, but the rubber is really like where the numbers are, what the numbers end up being. And I think it's going to require some, really good scrutiny and investigation to see like what's actually happening on the ground for real.
Right. Before we get out of here, I do have to give the Seattle Times a shout out. And, I would just call it like I see it, because I've been on certain things where I've been like, man, the Times years ago, they was doing this, they were doing that or whatever. But it's two things I gotta give the Times a big shout out. And one, that's that digital unit over there. I mean, those are amazing. Like, we aspire to be able to tell stories as well as that team does over there.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, and to the point, like, people all over the country would hit me and be like, what's going on in Seattle? What's this? I didn't have time, but I would send them The Uprising, the film that the digital team there
Beautifully
did.
done. Yeah.
And there's so many. I encourage people to go to the Seattle Times YouTube channel, because there's so many stories that are over there. And it's real encompassing. You guys have to read too, by the way. I'm not trying to tell people not to read.
Thank you, Omar.
I'm just giving them a shot. But the other one is Dan Beekman, who's also a bulldog like us.
I'm not saying that all bulldogs are great, but I mean,
But exactly. But Dan, and I wanted to highlight this because, I was frustrated, and it was probably a year and a half ago now, maybe longer, and about. Well, actually, it was COVID that just started, so it was about a year ago. And it was like these aggressive people were going in the neighborhood, like, hounding our elders to try to sell their homes. And Ruby Holland was what put a post up on Facebook. And me, very little blog at the time, but the community liked it, so I kept writing about stuff. And so I wrote about how Ruby's interaction with this real estate company over in Bellevue, and just kind of posted it or whatever. And Dan Beekman picked it up. And this is the thing is when you talk about the resources, the Times picked up the story, and then the Times had their real estate specialists on there. Then there's somebody who knows the taxes and everything else. And then there's somebody who whatever. So I think it was like 4 different people took what Ruby Holland talking about her experience on Facebook. We wrote it, and elevated it to the community. Dan Beekman and the Seattle Times picked it up. You guys put all your resources on it, and it turned out to be some real interesting things that came out and shed a spotlight on it. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that there's been quite a few times where where we've done as much as we can. I can press publish, and it's on the web. I can tweet it out. If it goes something, it goes. If it doesn't, but the Times has been intentional quite a few times to look at things and then be like, what? There's a story here, and put your resources behind it.
Right. And listening to diverse sources, I think that's critical, right? Whether that's from the community, whether it's Converge, like keeping our ears open and really hearing what people are talking about, what they care about.
All right, good stuff. Before we let you go, you can look right there in that camera, and you can tell people how they can keep up with you.
Hi, everyone. You can read my columns on Mondays at the seattletimes.com.
Twitter or anything?
Oh, yeah. I'm terrible at Twitter, but it's NaomiIshisaka.com. All my social media is really obvious, so.
All right, good stuff. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
Yeah, we had a good time. Tomorrow, it's back to politics, but it's all good. We've got Bruce Harrell, candidate for mayor of Seattle. And so we'll be talking to Bruce Harrell. We'll get some information from him about his campaign and also this issue up in Bitter Lake and some other stuff. And I'm really enjoying the conversations, and so hopefully we'll have a good conversation with Bruce Harrell tomorrow as well. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
A few programming notes here real quick is that tonight, 7 o'clock, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Also, we've got a replay of episode 1, a GTF Outside. And then tomorrow, 7 o'clock, Clapback Culture, Julia, Jesse, and Besa Gordon. Besa's filling in for Mike because Mike is hosting a writer's block at 8 o'clock tomorrow night with Erica C. Barnett, Publicola, Hannah Scott of Cairo FM, Ari McKenna from the Emerald, and they're talking about the politics of homelessness. We're going to get out of here. It's 12 on the dot. Until tomorrow, I want to remind you, go forward in your purpose, go forward in your humanity, and until tomorrow, peace. You got to hit him with the peace sign. There it is.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun.